I'm Leslie Holden. I'm a co-founder at the Digital Fashion Group.
And I'm Chiles, the other co-founder of the Digital Fashion Group.
We research and curate knowledge and information about what's happening in digital fashion at the moment. And since we launched our first course in July 21, we have educated over 13,000 people.
We focus on digital fashion from the perspective of the creative. And this is about taking digital fashion from A to Z in the product development process for a fashion designer. Also on the complete fashion value chain. And that again is from A to Z. What we talk about is the digitalization of the process. And that's from the initial spark for the creative through to the storytelling and the sale of product. Bloomsbury Digital Fashion Masterclasses is a series of 20 video masterclasses that we produced in collaboration with Bloomsbury Publishing. Some of the key players that we have interviewed are people involved in design, people involved in manufacturing, and people involved in retail. And that retail stretches from traditional bricks and mortar retail through to omni-channel presentation. Each of our video masterclasses is supported by a comprehensive academic case study and teaching notes, which are designed to help universities introduce the masterclasses to their program and for tutors to be able to interact with the videos and interact with the class and direct students accordingly.
Digital fashion covers a whole variety of different aspects of digitalization in the fashion industry through the whole value chain. Everything always starts with the creative. And we really focus on how the creative is working within this area and how digitalization is an extremely pragmatic tool to ensure a more sustainable fashion industry. I got involved in digital fashion in education a long time ago, actually in the 90s. And I was at that point in time head of a design department in an American university based in London. We thought it was really important for students to start learning how to work with digital fashion. Going on a few years, when I was head of fashion at Amsterdam Fashion Institute, we decided to make digital designing a real pillar within the Amphi education. And we built our first course in digital fashion about 2007. Initially, it was with Lecture Modadis, and then when CLO came out in 2010, we shifted to CLO as well. So we had management students working on Lecture Modadis because that suited the management students much better, and CLO is so much more intuitive and better for the design students. So it really built as a fundamental course, and every fashion design student had to do some level of digital fashion. When I decided to leave Amphi in 2020, I thought, what am I interested in looking at? Well, I'm really interested in researching into digital fashion. And that was the beginning of Sean and I really starting to talk about what is digital fashion and how can we work within this area and really work on ensuring people are better educated in the potential for digital fashion.
I've always been interested in the digital tools that one can use as a designer. And that goes back to the very beginnings of me working as a designer, and that's a long time ago. I can always remember being fascinated by the first fax machine, for example, in my first job in Hong Kong. And while that isn't digital fashion, it's a digital tool that started to change how things work in the industry. As I progressed in my career, and I went from being a designer through to design director of a large group, I introduced use of Adobe technology and net graphics for development of textiles in CAD. And I tried to transform the design studio. And one of the focuses on this was in getting things accurate, in reducing waste, in looking at how you could develop many, many different options of designs and iterations of designs from textiles and coloration through print and actual garment. The interaction with pattern cutting and laying and manufacturing came along, which also had a great impact on how things work in the industry and on cutting delivery times, on cutting waste, and making things much more responsive to what was happening at the sales floor. Apart from that, as everything developed, I became very much more interested in how design within a computer environment was happening. I joined Amphi in Amsterdam, working with Leslie, and joining their program. I was then involved with working with Lectra, specifically for the denim minor program, where we started to look at how you could design fully in the computer and translate and transform for production, and found that to be a really fascinating field to focus on. At the Digital Fashion Group, we have developed a skills program, 3Design, the fundamentals of digital fashion design, where we use Clo 3D as the main software. And we see this as being an essential piece of software for digital transformation in the fashion industry and for supporting the creative designer in really digitizing their process from A to Z.
This is very important now because digitalization in the fashion industry is urgently needing to be understood for its potential and its ability to ensure a more sustainable industry. Digitalization in the fashion industry has been building for a number of years. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of hype, which has shifted and changed, but perhaps it's a good thing because in hype, you clear out the things that are least important. And we would say that the focus now is going back to understanding how important it is to help with a sustainable, on-demand structure of manufacturing. Students need to have as much information as they possibly can about the possibilities for a more digitalized industry. And that information is so fresh because it's a growing new field and there's very limited academic knowledge in this area. So with our masterclasses, we're actually providing up to the minute knowledge of what's happening in digital fashion on the ground by the key experts in the area. And this rich knowledge and information will help lecturers build lecture programs and will help students understand what the context of digital fashion is.
Supporting university programs and program leaders with these digital masterclasses really can introduce a new aspect to digital transformation in the fashion industry, keeping up to date with what's happening now and what's happening in the immediate future. Being able to respond to the actuality of digital transformation in the fashion industry means that courses can stay ahead of the curve. What will surprise people from these masterclasses is the potential of digital within the fashion industry. And that is the potential from the designer in Initial Spark at A, going through to how the consumer will interact with fashion, both on a digital level and a physical level. And what's clear from the full range of the masterclasses is that every aspect of the industry is touched by digital transformation. What we're really excited for people to see in the Bloomsbury Digital Fashion Masterclass collection is the insight into what is happening in the fashion industry from a digital perspective.
When we first started the Digital Fashion Group, we were focused on just looking at education. And that's how we started building what we were doing, because we are fashion designers, we are educators. Our experience is very much about building programs, building curriculum. So that was our first start. But then we realized that it wasn't just higher education that needed this kind of education. Lots of people in the industry needed it as well, and educators needed this education. The first thing that we did was put together programs of education. The second thing we did was actually go into universities and do train the trainer courses with the educators, bringing the whole faculty together, doing 2-part days of training, covering a manifesto of intention, a body of knowledge and skills, the learning outcomes, the learning objectives of how to pivot towards digital fashion. And then we also realized that industry needed more support in understanding how to pivot towards digital fashion as well. So we started working more with industry on what it was, how it could work for them, what it meant to them. So our business model has changed and developed almost in tandem with how digital fashion has been developing as well. But we're very careful not to jump on too many hypes. So with the whole hype about the metaverse, we talked about it, but we were very careful not to identify ourselves as just being in the metaverse. And now with AI as well, AI is a tool. It's a wonderful tool. It's got lots of potential, but it's not the only thing that's happening in the digitalization of fashion.
We developed the Digital Fashion Group in order to focus on what was happening in the fashion industry and what was happening in fashion academia. And the purpose really was to look at digital transformation in the industry and in education, and to bring a new perspective about the position of the creative being at the center of the data dialogue. And really, that's what we focused on in our 4 years of development so far. We spent the first year and a half researching, investigating, and understanding what was happening in digital fashion in both education and the industry. We spoke to many, many people in the industry, many, many people in academia to understand the position at that point in time. So we became really informed as to what was happening in the industry. And that then informed what we were going to do in terms of delivering a product. That product that we started off with was a course called Digital Fashion 101, which is talking about the mindset of people in fashion at that point in time. And this was 2 years or so ago when we launched that. And looking at the digital mindset that was required in the fashion industry for digital transformation in order to impact on how things were developing in the industry, from how a designer works in the studio through to how the clothes are produced at the end, or how clothes are even returned, was one of the key things that we considered and looked at. And so we became really, really informed on what was happening in the industry. And our mindset course really started to deliver aspects of what was happening in the industry with a view to considering what you need to do, how you need to position yourself, what you need to understand, what you need to look for, and where you're going to go with digital transformation in fashion. We built on that by developing our skills course, which is based on using Clo 3D, which we call 3 Design, the Fundamentals of Digital Fashion Design. And this was aimed at actually delivering digital transformation skills to the fashion designer, whether they are a recent designer or somebody with 30 years experience. Anybody who wanted to retrain or look at new ways of developing and designing product in fashion. So we developed a 6-unit course using Clo, using highly experienced instructors, using our learn by doing technique. And we've delivered that along with other mindset courses to over 13,000 people to date.
At the Digital Fashion Group, we consider the whole value chain, the whole supply chain, but we focus on the creative. We believe that in the future, the creative will be center stage in the data dialogue, close to the manufacturer in an on-demand structure of manufacturing, and close to the consumer in an ongoing conversation about what the consumer wants, needs, wants to collaborate in. And the creative will be, in many ways, the director of the fashion supply chain, the spider at the center of the web. That's our dream. Of course, this means a completely different kind of fashion designer, or perhaps more opportunities for different kinds of fashion designers. But it's really important to us also that the traditional, fundamental, artisanal craft of fashion is still there, and that digital is merely a tool that the creative can use to enhance their creativity and to develop new ways of looking at fashion.
For us, digital fashion is really about the digital transformation of the fashion industry. It's not just about the digital fashion that is produced for consumption via the metaverse or online. It's also about physical fashion that is embedded in what we do. And we still believe in fashion that needs to be produced. There is a new route for a designer. That designer can now be a purely digital fashion designer and produce only for the digital realm. This is very different because that designer has no constraints such as fabric, drape, or whatever. It can be anything that you like.
The digital designer has to still understand how garments are made, where seams should go, the construct of a garment, because if they don't, then it's not fashion, it's fantasy. Digital for physical is really what we're looking at, what we're concerned with. We're not concerned with just digital for digital's sake. It has to be digital for physical, to make better physical, to make garments which people want, garments which fit better, garments which have been better researched by AI, so that the designer is more in control of the data knowledge to understand what the market actually needs, rather than kind of going, oh, I fancy yellow this year for no reason. And that's we see as one of the primary ways that we can make fashion a less wasteful industry, by ensuring that we're using digital technology to give us the data that's needed to make better choices at the designer stage. And because the designer is often left in a little bubble at the beginning and doesn't understand what happens at all going down the supply chain, so, oh, just you be creative, and then we'll take your designs and then we'll change it all the way through the supply chain. Everybody will have a bit of a input into it, and then at the end of the day, the design comes out with no authenticity of what the designer actually intended at the very beginning. And digital can give the designer a stronger position in that whole chain of events, with better information, better knowledge, better connection to the entire supply chain.
People designing fashion in the digital world who are not fashion designers. They are creating fantasy. And this ties into perhaps the gaming world, and where a lot of digital fashion began originally, which is through gaming engagement and gaming programs. The digital tools that fashion designers use today are from creating digital avatars and digital clothing for gaming. One of the important things for the Digital Fashion Group is the focus still needs to be on the designer and on design and on people who are trained to be designers. You know, you go through 4 years or sometimes 7 years in training to be a designer. And this means that you understand the whole process from A to Z of creativity, of development, product development, manufacture, retail. And therefore, when you design and develop a collection, there is a whole research basis behind this. And this is a really vital element to how the designer works. We really believe in focusing on how that designer can utilize the full range of the digital tools in a digital suite to go from the spark and the research through to understanding the consumer.